Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you a collaboration that I have with Bea Grobe, Peg Robinson, and Gina Ahrens. We've been doing this all year at the season, at the beginning of each season. So this is for winter, and I started my background with a grungy gel print that everything didn't come up, and so it was kind of and then I had some deli paper that had some little flower shapes on it. Someone had sent me this, and it looks like they painted something. They painted some flowers, and then this is the leftovers. So I'm collaging some of that on with some Liquitex matte gel medium and filling in those areas where the gel print didn't completely come up from the plate, and I had some leftover spots. This stencil in the background is from Stencil Girl, and I think it's really cool. It's kind of, I don't know, tribal or Mayan or something looking. It's interesting, but um, I'm just using it because of the colors. Because to me, winter, when you say winter, I think of blues and grays and purples. And so those were the colors I was going for. Then I had some other pieces that had some silver paint on them, and they're deli paper as well. And I'm putting those down, as well as some tissue paper that has some print on it. It's like a tissue paper that's supposed to look like a newspaper. Then I make some glazing medium using a golden glazing medium, which is a polymer paint that has no pigment in it. Mix it up with some Prussian blue hue and put it on the whole thing, and then wipe it back with a wet wipe. And then I'm taking some white gesso and filling in a few areas with it to add a little bit more white, and kind of blending that with my finger or with a wet baby wipe as well. Just filling things in, making it an interesting mixed media background. Then I use that same paint to stamp some snowflakes. This is a very, very old stamp from Stampin' Up. And I apply the gesso with a sponge dauber onto the stamp, and then when I'm done, I immediately clean the stamps to get that stuff off. The last thing I did to this background before I scanned it was to add some blue Stickles glitter glue, and just here and there, and blend it in with my finger. And that was my finished background, which I then scanned with my scanner and shared it with the other girls so that they could print it off and use it. So here are all the prints that I have. The first one was Gina, the second one was Bea, this one's mine, and then I also have Peg's. And they've each been printed on a laser printer, so they don't smear or anything. And I'm going to use them to make my art. That's what this whole collaboration is about. Be sure that you go and look at everyone else's videos so you can see what they did with the same background prints. We all had the same ones, and so we all made some sort of art using them, and everyone's art will absolutely be different. Everyone will have a different idea, but what I found interesting about the shared backgrounds this time was that they were all blue. So I'm not the only person that thinks of blues and grays and a little bit of purple when I think about winter. Everyone had the same basic idea. So I am taking Peg's background and my background and tearing them up and making a collage background on my page. This is the Arteza acrylic paint pad. So it's like a heavyweight textured paper that has the texture of canvas on it. And that's what I've been making my pieces on this year. I do plan to continue this collaboration for the upcoming year, but I think that some of the people will change. Bea and I will still be in it because Bea started it. And I think Gina's staying, but I think Peg is leaving. So we'll have a different person collaborate with us next year. It's hard to commit to something for a whole year, but since this one is only once a quarter, it's not so bad. So this is a printed picture, and I got it from something called unsplash.com, which is a site where photographers can upload their photos and you can use them in your art without any worry about copyright. If you just randomly pick a picture off the internet, there's a possibility that that's a copyrighted picture, and you really should not be using that in your art. Even if you're planning on changing it, you still, that's somebody else's art that you're basically taking. But at Unsplash, they're giving it to you. So Unsplash is a great place to get photos, high quality photos. I printed this out on my inkjet printer, and then I put some fluid matte medium over it and brayered it on so that it would be sealed. Because with inkjet, of course, that ink moves with water. It's not going to resist the mediums like the laser printed ones do. And then I'm cutting apart the picture. I cut apart the face and arms and neck and midriff and the necklace. And then I took the shirt or dress top that she's wearing. I took those pieces and cut them out of, I believe this one is Gina's background. So now I'm replacing the black top that she was wearing, which has some batwing flowy sleeves and maybe something, maybe a cape or something in the background. Replacing that completely with a cutout in the same shape of Gina's background paper. And I'm sticking this down carefully, trying to line everything up using Liquitex matte gel medium again, the gel formula. Of course, I don't get it perfect, and I do have to do a little bit of touch up, but I'm planning on painting over the top of the photo anyway, so I'm not all that stressed about it. The reason it didn't perfectly match is because I used the black parts of the photo as a pattern, but I didn't exactly attach it. So I was holding the paper to the other paper and cutting around it, and you don't get a perfect cut. So, plus then my lining up at the bottom wasn't exactly perfect either. I also want to use Bea's background, which is the lightest one of all of them, to make some trees in the background like she's outside in a snowy winterscape outside. So these are going to end up being kind of birch trees. Those are the ones that are white with dark kind of horizontal lines across them. I know you know what I'm talking about. Pretty sure they're birch trees. So of course, it would be super smart to have put the birch trees down first before I put the girl on there. Yeah, sometimes I do stuff like this. I make it more difficult for myself. What I was concerned about was that I wouldn't have enough of the blue paper to put as many trees as I wanted. Then I ended up not putting them all the way across, and so I would have had plenty of paper. But I didn't know this book is larger than 8.5 by 11. So, and my printed out paper is 8.5 by 11. But then I have to cut the edges off, so some of it's even smaller than that. And I just wasn't sure how much paper I would have and would it be enough. So that's the reason that I put the girl on first, to cover up that area that wouldn't be needed. But then now I'm having to piece and part all my trees into the background. So I don't know. That wasn't maybe a very smart move. That's just how I roll. So this background's pretty interesting. It's got little stars on it, but in the end, you really don't see the stars as much. But at this point, you can see that there are stars on Bea's background. And if you want to know how any of the backgrounds were made, you can look at the other videos, which are linked below mine, and you can see them making, probably you can see them making their background, unless they deleted the footage. Last quarter, I deleted the footage, or I didn't have the footage when I went to make the final piece. I didn't have the footage of making the background because there's like this big space of time in between So I got all my trees on there and I was pretty happy with that. Time to do a little bit of detail work and painting and changing things, colors. I printed the picture in black and white, and so I'm going to paint over the top of it with water soluble media. And what I decided to use was my Neocolor 2 uh, water soluble crayons. So I'm starting with some blue shadows in the background, and my my background paper and Peg's background paper both had a kind of a Prussian blue, kind of a teal color in the page, and then Bea's background and Gina's background both had more of like a cyan or a royal blue or something that doesn't have as much green in it. So I decided to delineate the two papers and separate the background from the foreground by using a tealish colored crayon to start out with. This isn't my finish, what I finished with, but I just wanted to get that on there. So I used the crayon directly to the background, and then I blended it with a water tank brush that has water in the handle. And then I wanted to brighten up the trees and make them come to the foreground more. And so I'm using some white acrylic paint and just kind of putting the white in areas. I want to have the trees have that kind of those horizontal darker spots on them like these kind of trees do. So I'm not completely covering it with white, and I'm watering down the white paint as well to make it kind of almost like a glaze or a wash over the top, just to brighten up the trees and make them a little bit more to the foreground. And then my next step is to start adding some detail and shadows to her outfit. Um, it had shadows in the picture, but of course, once I cut it out of just a plain background paper, it didn't have as much shadows and highlights. So I'm using a dark blue crayon and some white paint to fill those shadows back in and make it fit her body a little bit more rather than just being flat, and adding back in the creases and folds in the fabric so that you can tell that it's some type of an outfit and not just a blue blob. I'm also adding the white acrylic highlights as well. So it appears to be some type of a fitted top, but then a lot of extra material hanging off it. So it's kind of cool. Flowy, bohemian. So then I'm starting to fill in the skin color. I want her to have very white hair, and I want her to be pale or Nordic type of coloring. So I'm using my lighter crayons mixed with the white acrylic paint that's watered down on my palette and the water in my brush to give her a pale complexion. And then her hair is going to end up being white, white. Not just blonde, but white, white. When I searched for a photo on Unsplash, I put in blonde woman, hoping to come up with someone who had a very, very pale hair. And this is a blonde woman, but she does have some darker undertones in her hair. So I start with one color, then I switch to a little bit darker color to add in some more darker skin tones in areas that would be shaded, and then I switch to a darker color. Add some pink, add some I want to warm her up a little bit so she doesn't look as gray. And this process takes a while. You just keep adding layers and adding layers. And because this is a water-soluble product, it's fairly translucent. So the shadows that are on the photograph originally come through, and you don't have to worry about adding as much shadow as you would otherwise. This is kind of a cheat. It's how to paint a person without as much work, I waited to the last minute to do this project. I had so many things going on, I didn't get things done. So I didn't want to do a full drawing and portrait like I normally would, and I have done on some of these. I wanted to just be able to do it fairly quickly and still look pretty cool. So that's what I did. Now I'm taking that white acrylic paint that's on my palette and I'm adding it to her hair and really lightening up her hair. Still leaving some of the shadows in so that you can see the differences between the strands, but making her hair basically white. Using that acrylic paint to add some highlights again to the parts of her face that would be sticking out, like the nose and the forehead and the chin, the cheekbones. Just continuing to work on it. Adding a very bright white highlight to the necklace. I think probably these are silver beads that the girl had on in the photograph, but they stopped showing up, so I added white highlights to them. Adding some blue to her eyes. And just going back and forth, adding, blending, taking away, adding until I'm happy. That's how I do this. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Very mixed media because we've got collage on there with mixed media backgrounds. We've got a photograph. We've got water soluble media. We've got acrylic. Just a lot of different things mixed around. So I wanted to give her an ice crown. The way she's holding her hands up, it kind of looks to me like she's adjusting her crown. So this is a winter goddess, and I wanted to give her an ice crown. So I'm using some of those scraps left over from the pieces of paper, cutting them in kind of crescent shapes, and then gluing them down up ways, like as if they're going up. And then I darken everything with a Stabilo all black pencil, just adding lines where I think that they need to be. Almost illustration, but more scribbly or painterly look. And then, of course, this is a highly water reactive pencil. So I will be activating it, blending it with a water brush when I'm done. I'm going to be going all around the girl and then up and down the treats on both sides and kind of scribbling in to the darker areas a little bit to darken them up. And then here I have my water brush. This one has a bigger brush on it, and it's Arteza, so I can get a lot of water out. So I'm just blending everything. Sorry, I have hiccups. Blending and smoothing and adding all that shadow to darken everything up. And I like it in combination with the blue that I put in the background. It's interesting to me to have both colors. Add a little bit of splatter and some highlights with the white Posca pen and brighten things up with the white Posca. After the camera is already off, I add a half moon to her crown on her forehead. It's kind of a Nordic look. And I also add some silver glitter to the crown and to the beads, which you'll see in the close-ups. But that's about it for this winter piece of art celebrating the beginning of winter. And be sure to check everyone else's videos out. Remember to give this a thumbs up. Leave me a comment or question below. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're subscribed and not getting notifications, you might need to turn on your notification bell. You can share this on Pinterest or on Facebook, and all those things help people find my channel. So I'm always very grateful when you do that. The last thing I did is I thought that that one area was had too much pink and purple in it, so I just kind of blued it down a little bit. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.